Shalom everyone, and welcome to our weekly Soul of the Parsha class. This class is for Shavuot, the upcoming holiday tonight, and we're going to talk about Megillat Ruth, the scroll of Ruth. But interestingly, we're not going to talk about Ruth herself. I do like speaking about the women of the Bible. I think they're fascinating. I wrote this year a Hebrew book about the women of the Torah. Hopefully a future volume will deal with the women of the Nach, the Nevi'im Ketuvim books, one of which is Ruth. But today we're not going to talk about Ruth. We're going to talk about the overshadowed mother figure of Ruth, who is Naomi. Naomi is the second female protagonist of the story, more in the shadows. The scroll is not named after her. She's not the famous convert after whom many female converts have been called over the years. She's not the one doing this amazing journey from the land of Moab, being, according to the sages, I'm talking about Ruth, the daughter of the Moabite king, and then dedicating herself to the Jewish people and the Torah and God, and doing this amazing journey upwards, and thereby becoming this role model for both Jews and non-Jews as they try to stand before the Torah every year on the festival of Shavuot. No, we're not talking about her. We're talking about Naomi. Naomi is less often talked about. Less often do we see the depth and the interesting psychology and spirituality of this figure. So today, this is what we want to do. So it is true, we have to start with the fact that she isn't the main protagonist. Ruth is the main protagonist, and this is a story of how Ruth was found and how she made this journey. However, she is extremely vital to the story, and she opens the story. The story does not begin with Ruth. It begins with Naomi and her family as they leave the land of Israel in the time of the judges, because there was hunger in the land. They left, and then they go through many hardships, especially Naomi. And so the story begins with her, and she's not the protagonist, but she's the one who brings about all of what's happening. And not only does she bring it about, but she also guides Ruth along the way. But on the other hand, she herself has a very hard life, and she talks about this in the scroll, just how bad her life is. So first, let's just remember a little bit the story, what's going on in the story. The story begins with a Jewish family in the time of the judges, Elimelech, Naomi, and their two sons, who are called Machlon veKilion. According to the Pshat, they leave the land of Israel because they don't have food. It's a time of hunger, there's no bread, and they're looking to find their fortune in another country. And this is very clearly a sin. It's obvious in the story that the difficulties, the hardships, what happens is as they get to Moab, they live there. The two sons marry two Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. But then all three men die. Out of the family of four that left the land of Israel to Moab, the husband, the wife, and the two sons, all three men die. The husband dies and the two sons die. All that are left are Naomi and her two brides, Orpah and Ruth. So this is very clearly a punishment for a sin. So according to the Pshat, the simple reading, the sin is that they didn't withstand the hardship. So maybe there's no food, there's hunger, but that's no excuse, it's no good reason to leave the Holy Land. There is, however, another explanation. This is what Rashi says, which is that they were very well off. They were a very rich family. Elimelech was very rich. And the reason he left was not that he didn't have enough food. He had, but because he was miserly. It was tzarut ayin, stinginess or miserliness. The fact that he didn't want everyone clamoring around his house and asking him all the time to help them, and that was his sin. In many ways, it's a worse sin. In both cases, whether it was because he was hungry or because he didn't want to help hungry people, This is a very egoistic behavior. Now, what's very interesting, and this is really the beginning of all this, looking into her character, is that she was the one who didn't die. How come she was the one to survive? Right? It's a family of 4. They're all sinning. It's the father who leads the family, and then she goes along with him, and the 2 sons. So you could say, well, she's just going after her husband, but the same goes for the 2 sons. But the 2 sons did die. So you could say, well, it was the men leading, and the women they didn't make the decision, and that's one of the explanations given. But again, this isn't enough. There's something very interesting here, that of all this family, this rather wicked family, the leaving and maybe being so miserly and so on, she is a survivor, and she's the one whom God, he feels sorry for her, and he shows his mercy to her, and she stays alive. So one explanation is that really she had it the worst off. It's much worse to lose your 3 loved ones, to lose your husband and your 2 sons, than it is to die. So that's one explanation. Maybe she had it the worst, but of course there's another side to this, which is the fact that after all she's alive, and of course she's alive because she has a very, very important role to play. So this is really the beginning of what we want to look at, is that she's part of this family, but she is she's blessed with this power of survival, and is able to be there and find Ruth. And maybe the deepest explanation we can find for this is that as she was joining her husband and her sons on this way to Moab, she knew it was wrong, right? Because again, we have the fact that she stayed alive. So there was something more righteous about her in comparison to her family. So going backwards, she must have known it was a wrong thing to do, to leave. However, she felt that there was a mission here, a shlichut, something to be done here, and that God's hand was sort of guiding them. That it's a wrong thing to do, but there's something mysterious going on in the background. I don't understand, but let's open our eyes and see what it is. And in fact, she's the one to bring this holy spark of Ruth from Moab. So the rest of the story is that they go there, and then the 2 sons marry, Orpah and Ruth, and then the 3 men die, and then she's very loving towards her 2 brides, and she tells them, please go back to your mother's houses. And it's interesting that she says mother's houses, is very feminine. And she says, and find your husbands and leave me. And they say, no, we love you. And they both say this. Again, we remember Orpah in very negative light, because she ended up leaving and not dedicating herself to Naomi as Ruth did. But that's not how it starts out. It starts out that they're both very, very loving, and they love her very much. And it's very clear that she brings out, Naomi is the one who brings out the goodness out of both Orpah and Ruth. But then she tells them, no, stay. She insists, stay, and I can't give you any more sons. I wish, she says, an amazing sentence, I wish I could get married tonight and bear 2 more sons for you to marry, but I can't. And that's almost comparing herself to Eve, who, according to the sages, was pregnant and gave birth all on the 6th day of creation. So where do you even get this idea from, that I wish I could marry tonight and give birth to 2 children? That's exactly what Eve did in the days of creation, when everything was much, much faster. On Friday, she got married and became pregnant and gave birth to 2 sons. So she's really comparing herself to Chava in this sense. And then Orpah says, so I'm staying, and Ruth comes with her and dedicates herself. And then they go to Eretz Israel, they go back, and the city is astir with seeing this Naomi coming back, and they remember how she left having so much, and she's coming back empty-handed, and she says, don't call me Naomi. This is very interesting. Don't call me Naomi. First they say, is this Naomi? We can't recognize her. Of course they can. That's what they ask, is this Naomi? And she says, I am not Naomi. Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Mara means bitter. And then really what she does from here on is it's almost as if she gave up on herself. Giving up on her name symbolizes giving up on herself. And she says, and from now on she's dedicating herself only to Ruth. And she's telling Ruth, now you go find Boaz and you get close to him. And then she, step by step, she teaches her what to do until finally Ruth is okay and is married to Boaz. And then Naomi feels that she served her purpose. But it only happens after she is willing to let go of herself, to forget about herself, let go of her name, and dedicate herself to this young convert that she took from Moab and is bringing now to the land of Israel. Now, so first let's now try and go a little bit deeper. When we have two women, a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, then in Kabbalistic Hasidic terms, this very clearly goes together with the two feminine letters of God's name, right? God's name, 4 letters, Yud, K, Vav, K, and the Yud and the Vav are masculine, the two Hey are feminine. So the upper Hey, or the first Hey, is the more mature or older, higher feminine aspect, and this is Naomi. And the lower Hey is the lower feminine aspect, which is here Ruth. So where is this coming from? This is very beautiful. This really, we can see that these two women sort of contain within themselves all the 4 mothers. How so? Leah and Rachel, the 2 wives of Yaakov, were also corresponded to the 2 Heys. Leah being the upper Hey and Rachel being the lower Hey. So what we have here is that Naomi is a sort of reincarnation of Leah, the older sister, also in the shadows, not as beautiful. Yaakov isn't as interested in her. There's a lot of similarities, and Rachel and Ruth corresponds, or is a sort of reincarnation of Rachel, the more beautiful, the more this worldly, and the one that comes more from below, as Ruth comes from below. But they're not only Leah and Rachel. Going even further back, we can see also echoes of Sarah and Rivka, Sarah and Rebecca. Why? Because Sarah corresponds to the upper Hey. She was sort of such a high maternal figure. Then God says to Abraham, you should listen to what Sarah tells you, not the other way around. So she's the upper Hey, and she's the archetype even before Leah. So Naomi comes from Leah, which comes from Sarah. And then Ruth comes from Rachel, but also from Rivka, the second matriarch. She was very similar to Ruth, born in this non-Jewish world, but then coming up. This is different from Sarah. Sarah, we can say, also came up to Eretz Israel and came up to Judaism, but she was a convert. Sarah and Abraham would convert all the different peoples. And this is again very much like Naomi. Naomi is the converter. She's the one who's going to Moab and converts Ruth. So she's coming from Leah, but she's also coming from Sarah. And Ruth is coming from Rachel, but also from Rivka, who says, I will go, I will leave this non-Jewish world, and I will rebel against it, and I will go. And in fact, they both say the word, both Rivka and Ruth say the word elech, I shall go, this rebellious kind of, and I think that they're the only women in the Tanakh to say this word exactly, elech, I will go. And very interestingly, of course, Sarah and Rivka were mother-in-law and bride. So if we're going back to Leah and Rachel, it's two sisters. So there's this element of sisterhood between Naomi and Ruth. But if we go even further back to Sarah and Rivka, it's again, that's the origin. It's a mother-in-law and a bride. With a mother-in-law and a bride, which then become two sisters, which then again become a mother-in-law and a bride, with a kind of sisterly camaraderie. Let's say that they're going together. So what do we get from this? We get from this that this whole interplay of these two feminine levels, and of course we can go even one step, even earlier. We had Ruth and Naomi, and then Leah and Rachel, and then Sarah and Rivka. Going even further back, it's taking us back to Eve. We said that Naomi compares herself to Eve. So according to Kabbalah, there were really two Eves. There was this higher Eve, more spiritual, and then this lower Eve. Now, usually the whole interplay of these two Eves is that much of the story of the women of the Bible is about letting the upper aspect, the upper femininity back into the world. She was rejected when she was the first Chava, the first Eve. She was again rejected in a way when she was Leah, because Yaakov didn't love her as much. And here again, she's this very poor woman who's going through these terrible hardships, to the point that she's saying, "Don't call me Naomi, call me the bitter one, the bitter woman." So generally, the whole story is that we want to give this higher femininity more room. We want to let her into the world, and the whole story of Rachel is trying to help Leah become also the wife of Yaakov, and Rivka is taking the place of her mother. But there's another dimension to this, and the other dimension is that ultimately it does all have to go back to the lower feminine aspect, which needs to rise. This is very, very interesting. It's very deep, but the idea is that although the story of the lower feminine is to grow and grow and grow until it includes within it the lights of the higher feminine, there's also another aspect, which is that the higher feminine is supposed to say, yes, but you, the lower feminine, really at the end of days, you're the one going to rise and take my place in a way. And we see this amazingly in the very end of this scroll, when Ruth is blessed. She's blessed that she will become like Rachel and Leah, but Rachel is mentioned before Leah. May you be like Rachel and Leah. And the commentators ask, why is Rachel first here? Because Rachel she wasn't the first that he married. She didn't bring them the most children. But then one explanation is that yes, but Yaakov loved her first. And from the perspective of the natural kind of love, the love that's natural, that's easy, which is again that's the lower feminine aspect. She was the first. So the whole point of this is saying that the story of Naomi is the story of a woman who has a very hard time, but at some point says, I'm going through these hardships not for my own sake. I'm going through these hardships so that the next generation will have a scroll written after their name, that they will have a better life, that they start lower than where I am, or that I went down. I left the land of Israel and I went down to this exile, and in a way I'm never going to recover because I lost all my loved ones. But now there's still one more thing I can do. I can take someone from the place that I came to. That's why she's the converter, going down to raise the spark. I'm going to take someone and I'm going to make sure that they have the better life. And I'm putting myself in the shadows and I'm putting them in the foreground, and I want to have them rise up. And that's why in the end Ruth becomes the protagonist. The scroll is named after her. She's blessed with being like Rachel and Leah, Rachel being mentioned first. And this is we can take this into our own lives and say that sometimes we feel, especially after a certain age, that there are things we we can't do anymore, things we can't recover, things we can't fix, mistakes we've made, places we've gone down into, and there's no backtracking that. However, we can, with what the power we still have, with what the wisdom we've gained along the way, we still can use this wisdom and use the situation that we're in, even if it's the result of our mistakes, in order to find someone who may have a better future. And our children, our students, a son or a daughter-in-law, or someone that, and the next generation, the following generation, someone for whom we can now invest in them and give them the power and the blessing to rise higher than we have been. We may have had the potential to be something high, but that potential was lost, or an opportunity was missed. So that's I think that's the main story here. Okay, so let's try and sum this up. We have a family in Eretz Israel. We have a wife who's very clearly, afterwards it becomes clear that she's more righteous. She agrees to leave, feeling that there is something in the future, in the place they're going to, that there's a spark to be raised there. She goes there. She goes through these incredible hardships, and all the men in her life die. However, she is able to bring close these two Moabite women. Only one of whom would convert, but the other one also, the goodness of her comes out. Something incredible we didn't say before is that as she leaves Moab, the sages ask, why does it stress in the verse that she left? And they say, when a tzaddik, when a righteous person leaves a place, its beauty, its glory, its splendor, it all leaves the place. Of whom was this said before? It was said of Yaakov. These are the only two people in the Tanakh of whom the sages say this. It was said of Yaakov as he left the land of Israel. It says that as he left, the beauty and splendor of Eretz Israel was lost, because that's what happens when a tzaddik leaves. It is said again one more time of Naomi. As Naomi is leaving Moab, she must have brought some beauty to Moab, or brought out the beauty in Moab, as she takes out the spark and almost takes another spark, the Orpah. So this beauty is also leaving Moab as she leaves. This is again an amazing comparison between her and Yaakov, the husband of both Rachel and Leah. So Naomi, this is Naomi. Naomi is the converter, the maternal figure who has an amazing potential, is a very high soul, but for many reasons has going through a very hard life, and find herself in exile, and find herself losing her loved ones, but then is able to rectify all this, and by dedicating her life to her young Moabite convert bride, whom she then decides to dedicate everything she has to this figure, and to bring her to having a good life, an incredible life, to being Jewish, and to being married, and having all this. And we're going to finish with something very beautiful. When we talk about Naomi as the converter, this reminds us of the prayer we say 3 times a day, which is that we pray to God to gather all the different souls and to bring them back into the land of Israel. And this blessing of kibbutz galuyot, the collecting of all the exiles, or the ingathering of all the exiled souls, then it ends with the 4 words, Baruch Ata Hashem, blessed are you God, Mekabetz nidchei amo Israel, the gatherer of the exiled souls of his people Israel. Mekabetz nidchei amo Israel. If you take the first 4 letters of this 4 words, the acronym Mekabetz nidchei amo Israel, you get the word for Naomi. So she is the gatherer. She is the one who has to go through these hardships in order to find this soul and convert her. However, something even more interesting, the order is not Naomi. Min'i sorry, Mekabetz Nidchei Amo Israel, it's Mem Nun Ein Yud, not Nun Ein Mem Yud, and this comes into another word. It's an anagram of Naomi, which is Min'i. Min'i is stop or desist or cease. Min'i in a feminine form, right? We're saying to a woman, stop. It's a stop injunction said to a woman. So now this word appears twice in the Bible, only twice in the entire Tanakh, both of them in the book of Yirmiyahu, of Jeremiah. So the first is negative and the second is positive. The negative one is in the very beginning of Jeremiah, chapter 2. It says, Min'i raglech miyachef vigronech mitzam'a. Stop your feet from being barefoot, or your foot from being barefoot, and your throat from being thirsty. And the context is that this is a reproachful prophecy. This is the prophet speaking, reproaching the Jewish people for running away to worship foreign false idols. And then he tells them, if you're going to continue, you're going to come into exile and you're going to be barefoot and thirsty. So by stopping to worship those false idols, you're going to save yourself. I urge you to save yourself from going into exile barefoot and thirsty. Min'i raglech miyachef vigronech mitzam'a. Save your leg from being barefoot and your foot from being barefoot and your throat from being thirsty. You can do it, or else if you're not going to do it, that's what's going to happen. You are going to be barefoot and thirsty. Now, beautifully, this verse very much alludes to Naomi herself. She went down to exile and came back barefoot and thirsty, and she says, I'm not Naomi, I've been through such hardships, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. In a way we can say, don't call me Naomi, call me Min'i, because I didn't listen to this verse, to this warning, and it happened to me, and I have to accept it, right? The whole story of Naomi is that the one half of her story is accepting the fact that she made mistakes, or her husband made mistakes, or she made a mistake marrying him, or she made a mistake raising her two sons that they married Moabite women. But all these mistakes can be converted and lifted up and changed for the best, for the good. And this leads us to the second appearance of the word Min'i. The second appearance of the word Min'i is a very famous verse, Min'i kolech mi bechi ve'enayich mi dim'a. Stop your voice from crying and your eyes from shedding tears. This is not a reproachful, again it's Yirmiyah later on, not a reproachful but a comforting verse. This is a comforting, there are two kinds of prophecies, reproachful prophecies and comforting prophecies. So these two verses are perfect examples of them using the same word. So the second one is a comforting, and who does the prophet address? He addresses Rachel. And he says to Rachel, don't cry. There's no reason to cry anymore. All your exiled sons are going to come back. Amazingly, it also has to do with exiled children, sons, coming back to their country. So, of course, the first verse alluded to herself. She was Naomi. She was the one who didn't listen to the reproachful prophecy and went into exile barefoot and thirsty and is coming back without anything. However, she doesn't stop there. She doesn't say, my life is a tragedy, and that's it. Her story doesn't end with, call me Mara, call me the bitter one, because then she says, no, but there's still Ruth. And Ruth can have an amazing future. So now I'm going to switch to the second verse, Min'i kolech mi bechi. And she says this to Rachel, which is now Ruth. Don't cry and don't shed tears. You can marry Boaz, you can have an amazing future and family, and you will bring forth the Mashiach, the David HaMelech, the King David is going to come out. She doesn't know this yet, but in a way she sees this. She sees that there's an amazing potential in this Moabite soul. So this is the story of Naomi, and she's in the shadows, but she's an extremely important figure. She's the figure that is able to recognize that when life is harsh and dark, and you're not young, and you've passed the half point of your life or more than that, and you can't bring more children to the world, as she says, I can't bring any more children. And maybe for you it's over, but it's not really over, because you still have the chance to look after the next generation and put them on the right track, and this redeems you. So the story of Naomi is the story of this, how to redeem oneself by redeeming, by saving, by setting up a good future for the next generation. This is what Naomi does to Ruth. So may you all have a very happy Shavuot, and may we all merit to receive the Torah, a new Torah, each and every day, and especially tonight, besimcha ubepnimiyut, with joy and with connection to our own inner hearts, our inner souls, and may the Torah touch our inner hearts and souls. And Chag Sameach, and I will see you next week.